I believe the way out of this is basically to fight fire with fire. I think any company that has something important to lose should be very, very aggressive with their responses with cybersecurity.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with David Holtzman. David is currently Chief Strategy Officer at Naoris Protocol, right? Naoris Protocol.
Yes,
We had David Carvalho, is a CEO on one of our previous guests, and David was in the past designer of the global DNS system used by ICANN for which literally powers the global internet as we know it. And he was also White House cybersecurity advisor for under 3 presidential candidates, right? And you also, David, served as IBM's chief scientist, developing encryption products, and has consulted for various blockchain companies for 6 years now. And now we have a privilege to have David in our as our guest. So, David, thank you very much for joining our Risk Management Show podcast today.
we're glad to be here.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. So I believe we'll have a very thoughtful conversation on the topic of risks inherent in a centralized world, because now we have both centralized and decentralized world. But before that, David, could you tell us a short story about yourself, your career path, and what brought you right now to Naoris Protocol?
Well, I was CTO of Network Solutions during Y2K and designed the registration system that ICANN uses and helped create ICANN. So as we were trying to figure out what would happen with ICANN, it became obvious, at least to me, that the world was becoming centralized in what I thought was a dangerous way, because under certain kinds of centralized authentication strategies, you have single points of failure, and anything happens to that thing, and you have vulnerability across the whole network, whatever the network is. In 1997, when I was at Network Solutions, someone who worked for me made a mistake moving a database file. It was a pretty simple thing, but they still messed it up. And we ended up propagating, instead of the whole .com zone file, we propagated a zero-length database file. People started loading it. I mean, there's a single root server really that runs the whole thing, the dot, and then there's 12 slaves, and then they go out to networks. So when that zero-length file got sent out there, it basically flamed out about half the internet in 42 minutes. And now this was 30 years ago, but it was still so bad that it was front page news in almost every newspaper in the world within a couple of hours. Imagine what would happen today if the whole internet just went down for a day. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and we can talk about this. There are so many ways that can happen now. It's terrifying. And it's not always from bad actors either.
Yeah. So I know that there is now a lot of talk about cutting this cable that connect internet undersea. Also, there are some possibility for geopolitical cyber offenders to cut according to the country code. So a lot of possibilities can be propagated via this internet, right?
Right. Well, before, I don't know if it says it on the bio, but before I did internet software stuff, I was also a U.S. intelligence agent working for the National Security Agency on submarines. So I had hands-on experience with a lot of what you're talking about. But this was a long time ago. But even then, it was still potentially devastating.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so illustrious career. So, can you Can you speak to the role of centralized system in the growing concerns around surveillance, both by corporations and governments? Because now we have some issues with Telegram boss, what was his name? Durov, and his name, and now
Yeah, he got
France.
arrested.
Yeah. So it's all
Yeah.
intertwined with all this security protocols and government trying to kind of censor internet networks. What is your opinion about it?
Um, Kind of a big picture opinion. So in the last 30 years, there has been a trend in corporations to optimize their costs. They can't increase the revenue that much, but they can reduce the costs. And one of the ways they do that is by outsourcing things they're not even very good at. And there were a number of books written about this in the 80s. It kept going on and on and on. And then 10 years ago, we started seeing software as a service being a huge thing. And now, with the advent of cloud computing, um, I mean, when I was doing startups and even at Network Solutions, when I went to start a company, the first thing I would have to do was build out a data center. So we would rent a warehouse and bring in the power and buy a generator, and it was millions of dollars of capital, and then I had to hire people that knew how to run the thing. But that was what people did back in the 90s. Now nobody does that really. People just use cloud-based computing. They use Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
AWS, they use Store,
Yeah.
they use Snowflake, whatever. And when they do that, they have now shifted their weak point and vulnerability to a whole bunch of people and companies that they've never met and they never will meet. And when you look at the big data breaches in the last even 10 years, I mean, no matter what they say in the newspaper, if you really look at it, almost every one of them is the result of a vendor problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like CrowdStrike, or
Yeah.
Snowflake actually is a really good example.
Exactly.
Ticketmaster got 500 million records, but Ticketmaster doesn't run their own database. Snowflake runs it. And because they messed up, they took down Ticketmaster. And because Ticketmaster went down, I mean, I don't know, like 100 million, 200 million people had their credit card information taken. I got a letter, and then typically what companies do, which is highly disingenuous, is they put out things blaming the user because they picked a bad password, which doesn't account for 500 million records being stolen.
Yeah.
Um, pass, Password choice is not the problem in most hacks and most data breaches. It's very large scale things that take down lots and lots of people. So if you look at healthcare, for instance, there's been a number of cases in the last 15 years where, like Synovis or Change Healthcare in the United States. Change Healthcare is the second biggest health insurance company, and they were trying to merge with United Health Group. And
Mm-hmm.
what they do is they do what's called PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers. They process insurance claims, but because of that, they have their fingers in everybody's medical record. So they have access to health insurance companies, doctors' offices, hospitals, and everything else. And they got hit in 2022, 2023. They got hit really hard, and it affected apparently about a third of all adults in the United States. So, and what happens? There's no penalties for these things. I mean, occasionally they get their wrist slapped and they pay a few $1 million, which is nothing to a
Mm-hmm.
company who's got a market cap, 30 billion. Um, and then they provide a so-called benefit, which is they'll do credit monitoring for 1 year. But if you actually take them up on that, and I did with Ticketmaster a couple of months ago, the companies that run the credit monitoring are typically one of the three credit bureaus in the US, like Experian or TransUnion, and you have to give them even more information for them to monitor you. So consumers lose. But well, anyway, so that's kind of the big picture, and I can go into details on it. But I think it's getting worse. I think I think that all of us, it's not just, I mean, our privacy isn't even the issue anymore. That was gone a long time ago. What I'm worried about now is damages, financial damages, reputational damages. And that's not even getting into heuristics and algorithms. And if you want, we can talk about that, which is a related problem.
Mhm. Fantastic. So, what role, let's continue. What role do individuals and small companies play in the pushing back against centralization, and how can they protect themselves in an increasingly centralized digital landscape, as you said?
Well, there are technologies available now that are decentralized. That's what Naoris is. I don't know if David explained that, but the fundamental nature and significance of the Naoris Protocol that David invented is it is a decentralized authentication system. So the resolvers just are on different networks, and you're not reliant on any one centralized place to authenticate your PKI or any other kind of credentials. So that's pretty powerful. That's the first thing. The second thing is when you're in a decentralized system, the data, you control where the data lives. So whatever your data is, typically it's on your own device. So it's on your own servers, your own network, your own phone, your own laptop, whatever it is. In centralized systems, you give it all up. Like if you have an AWS system, at all, once you've integrated AWS, you've got your stuff out there, maybe in a virtual machine or Kubernetes setup, but it's still out there in the cloud. You don't control that data anymore. And when I say you, at this case, I'm talking small and medium businesses. So I think that what I advise businesses to do is to look for solutions where they control their own destiny. And if something happens, it's because they screwed up, not because somebody they've never heard of, in Ireland screwed up and took down their company. There's also been a number of problems with point of sale companies. There's been like 3 of those in the last 5 or 6 years. These are companies the average person has never heard of. And you go to a retail outlet and then you find out as a consumer, you just got hacked, but you don't know who that company is. And the reason is because they do credit card processing or point of sale stuff for some retail outlet that you went to a store, you bought a shirt, you swiped your credit card, and it went off somewhere. So that's what I mean when I talk about the dangers of a centralized world.
All right. So is there some solution in the blockchain technology, or also how they can evolution of blockchain? We know there are some financial use cases with smart contracts and stuff like this. But do they play also in this decentralized approach for security?
Well, they can. I mean, Naoris does, and there are other companies that do that. I'm a huge fan of blockchain, and when I first, maybe less so when I first saw like Bitcoin as a crypto, but once I saw Ether with the smart contracts, it really opened my eyes, because now you have a community consensual authentication mechanism that is not centralized. And I guess I don't trust governments, and I don't trust large companies either. And I don't trust them because I've been in those rooms with people and I've heard things that people have planned, and companies and governments have no morality. They're by their very nature amoral. So if they have a mission, they will do whatever they need to do to accomplish that mission. That's why the United States government, some of the stuff Snowden talked about, I thought was very revealing. One of which was that the U.S. government messed with NIST, and they modified random number functions, and so that they sometimes return bad non-random values. Well, that's at the heart of a lot of encryption strategies. So, and there was also problems with onion routing because it turned out there were some specious nodes in some of the like Tor and some of the other onion routers. So again, who are you going to trust? Trust yourself.
Mm-hmm. So you have been involved in high stakes environments like your time at IBM and chief scientist at New Network Solutions. What lessons can you withdraw from that era about centralization, long-term application, or innovation and control? And what viable solution can we get to mitigate this risk?
Yeah, I've thought about this for a long time. I can offer a few observations. One is, unfortunately, tech people don't actually make big business decisions in most companies. I mean, they do in Google and places like that, but most companies, if it's a petroleum company, if it's a manufacturing company, if it's a shipping company, whoever's doing the technology is like pretty low down on the totem pole, and they do not make decisions, not important ones, not this kind of decision. So who does make the decision? Typically, they are in most companies, they the finance track. So the CFO, who usually has the CIO reporting to them, answers to the board, and they make decisions based upon cost. So this is one of the reasons you have such bad security at most of these companies, is because they cheap out, and they
Mm-hmm.
find they put up a PowerPoint and they show, well, if you use Change Healthcare for your medical system, they're going to cost 15% less. And in America, I mean, this isn't true in much of Europe, but in America, the U.S. government has abrogated significant amount of its own responsibilities to third-party contractors, like our prison system. Much of the prison facilities in the United States are run by third-party contractors who are trying to make a big profit for their investors. So they cut down on satisfying basic human needs. The military no longer makes their own food. When the United States was in Afghanistan, they hired Burger King and McDonald's and Taco Hut, and they went over there and they provided a lot of the food because the military didn't want to do it anymore, because some finance bean counter sat in a room, put up a PowerPoint slide, and showed how it was like 3% cheaper to do that.
Mm.
So the reason I'm pointing this out is these are the danger patterns that have led us to where we are in centralization. I believe the way out of this is basically to fight fire with fire. I think any company that has something important to lose should be very, very aggressive with their responses with cybersecurity. So one of the problems I had, and this is back at the late 90s, occasionally we were the first. I probably defended the first real denial of service attack on a big scale, and it was waged by Bossk separatists.
Wow.
ETA was the group, and this was like in '96 or something. And we got a lot of those, but they weren't really good. They were usually denial of service. So then the decision I had to make, and there was no precedent, was, do I defend against it? Do I report it to the FBI, who actually didn't want to deal with it? Or do I take matters into my own hands and attack back, knowing that nobody will know what I did?
Mm.
And I did all three of those. And I know other people in my position over the next decade who, if they got an opportunity and they spotted somebody attacking them, they would often punch back before they could, and attack their machines. And I know that most intelligence agencies, that's part of the doctrine now of cyber counter espionage. I think everybody has to take it into their own hands. But what that means is we need tools. We need decentralized tools, and we need crypto weapons that you don't have to be, Russia or China or the United States to use, and that a company can use, or a small country. I think it's amazing. I'm just so impressed with Ukraine, because I thought they were going to just roll over on all this digital stuff right away, and they've completely created cyber warfare in the last year from a defensive viewpoint, and they've done pretty well at it, actually. And I think that's very indicative of the kind of things we'll see in the future. And it's not going to just be military warfare, it's also going to be corporate warfare.
Mhm. Interesting. So, so many front battles on this cyber world wars. It's a corporate, it's geopolitical, and so David, I would like to ask you a personal point of view. What are the major misconceptions in the field of internet security right now that you kind of strongly disagree with?
Well, other than the centralization approach, which is really, let's hire someone to do our security. It's like we'll hire someone to clean our house. It's not like that, but that's a lot of boardrooms think that. But the other thing that the misconception that bothers me, and this is this is a problem with B2C and retail. They they believe that the problem is consumers picking a bad password. I have seen this over and over and over again, and you see it in interviews with CIOs and CEOs. And what happens is they come up with absolutely ludicrous password creation schemes, thinking that's going to solve the problem. So 11 characters, one symbol, one number, blah, 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 blah. The difference between that and that 8 or 9 letter, string of letters, we're talking a nanosecond maybe for a fast cracking attempt. And for some reason, these people think, well, if we make people pick a hard password, we're never going to have this problem again. And it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. So let's drill a little bit deeper to a job of our main user, who is a listener, a risk manager. What is there is one thing that they should start to prioritize right now that they're not doing. What would it be?
They should have an audit of any vendor they use in their IT stuff, especially network and especially security. And they should, and when I say this, I don't just mean like hiring, a contracting firm. I also mean, what products are they using? I could go through a whole list of times that apparently innocent software products have had a defect, and that's how they got in. Microsoft products are notorious for this. And the reason, even if you know they're a problem, the CFO buys this because they go to a golf tournament in Orlando, Florida, and I've been there. I've been in those rooms. The Microsoft sales guy's there, and he buys them a steak dinner and all this stuff. And he says, "Hey, I want to sell you this, Microsoft, our new Office and our security solution, and blah blah blah." And the CFO goes, "Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea, Joe." And then they buy it, and then they dump it on some security guy and tell him, "Make sure nobody gets in to this piece of crap software." And they don't have the resources, and they don't have the tools. And typically what happens is, if the security people are any good, they will usually quit within 6 months of that, because they don't want to be left holding the bag when the inevitable happens. So, if given the example and the question you asked, I would, if when I'm in this position, I do an audit. I say, what contracting firms do we use? Why do I trust them? Which people are being assigned to my project? And if they're doing anything with encryption credentials, if they have any secrets, crypto secrets, I want to know how they handle them, and I want to know that they aren't being brought home at night and over the weekend. And I want to know who's got the root passwords for my machines. And then I want to know what software products they're using. And I want to know what process they're using to patch the damn things. Because that's the other problem. That's one of the big problems in corporate security problems is people don't put patches on, like
Mhm.
not very fast. I mean, I've heard this over and over and over again. If you have a 0 day, nobody can really be blamed for getting hacked on a 0 day. But people aren't getting hacked on the only people getting hacked on 0 days are like Iranian centrifuges to process uranium. They're very high stakes targets because these things are expensive. The average company is getting hacked because of like a 300 day. It's something that everybody knows about, and they have to apply the vendor patch, and they put it off, and then they get hit. So all of this stuff goes into an audit. And then you have to hire competent people to execute. And then the other thing that I would like to do inside the corporate level is raise the visibility of security audits to the level of the board of directors, because I guarantee you that is usually not the case. So typically, when there's any kind of security audit, the results are pitched in a very small room with the CFO and the CIO and maybe a CTO and a security guy, but it's not the outside directors. But when they have a problem with stock options, because of Sarbanes-Oxley bill in the United States, I guarantee you they talk about that at the board level. They need to do the same thing with security.
All right. So are there any emerging trends, developments, and other buzz trends, of course, buzz words like AI, and what do you see as a further development of security in the coming
Well,
years?
I mean, I have a thought. It's fairly controversial. So maybe not. I don't know. So I think we're moving into a world where all security actions are going to move so fast that no human being is capable of reacting to it. Um, we're almost there now, really. And what that means is that both attacks and defenses will, of necessity, have to be managed by AI systems of some kind, because nothing else can move that quickly. And if you look, I mean, I come out of the military world. If you look at surface to air missiles and, anti-aircraft guns, in almost every major navy these days, they are not run by human beings. They have been run by AI systems for 20 years. Because especially now, because like the Russians have these hypersonic missiles that fly right above the waves, and I think the Chinese have them too now. So you get something like that. It's flying 10 feet above the ocean, moving at like Mach 4 or Mach 3 or something like that. There's no way some 18-year-old E3 on a machine gun is going to shoot that thing down. But an AI system could, and that's what's going to happen. So that is analogous to what will happen in the cybersecurity world. And as attacks get more and more prevalent, we're going to see AI, maybe not LLM based AI systems, but we're going to see AIs defending corporations and governments. I'm sure of it.
Mhm. All right, awesome. So, David, if we summarize our interview for someone who's listening and would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would it be?
Cybersecurity is more difficult than it probably sounds, and yet at some level, it's also easier than it sounds. And you can't, if you're a business person, you cannot hire somebody to completely provide your cybersecurity solution. At the very least, you need to have in-house oversight of every step of the process, including the software, the people you hire, and you have to have both routine and random checks to make sure process is being followed.
Right, fantastic. That's all my questions. Perhaps if I forgot to ask you some questions that you find useful for our audience, please go ahead.
No, I just think I will say I think we're in a very interesting time. I didn't go into quantum because my colleague went into it on your show 2 weeks ago. There's no doubt that we're going to have some kind of workable quantum computing, maybe a year, maybe 10 years. I mean, we're getting there. There's right now a 1,000-qubit machine that's operational. When we get to about 500,000, 700,000 qubits, modern encryption is going to start breaking. So it would be wise for anybody to get their processes in line now before that day comes. Because when it does come, they're going to have everything's going to be upended, and they're going to have to completely reinvent how they do cybersecurity. So we have a window, and it would be foolish not to take advantage of that window.
All right, fantastic, David. Thanks again, and I wish you a great success for you and your company.
Thank you.
And I hope we will cooperate further in our community with more fantastic content from you guys, and also have a good product delivered to our community.
Yes, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.